We have a distinguished panel again, and we'll start off without any ado with Sudha Jagannathan. I've heard her speak before. She's very thorough. She's written many papers. Let me introduce her and hand it over to her. She's an Indian American. She has worked in the technology industry, now retired. And she is a board member and is dedicated to a grassroots advocacy group called CoHNA, or the Coalition of Hindus of North America. What they do is they strive to address the civil rights and the human rights issues faced by Hindus in the US and Canada. It's very rare. Generally, the Hindu community out here tends to assimilate and not be very politically active, so this is very refreshing to see. They strive to, now, her ancestral homeland is in Kerala, in the state of Kerala, in the deep south of India. And they witnessed a massive genocide that happened about a century ago under British colonial occupation. And it's called the Mappila Rebellion or the Mappila Rebellion. Some of you might have heard of it. And what she does is she spends time educating America and the world about this unrecognized genocide. Now, one of the things we do in ICHRRF or any serious human rights organization is to ring the alarm bells when they see a trend of escalation towards more genocide or a pogrom and so forth. So early warning systems. And there is an escalating trend again in her home, the ancestral state of Kerala. And so this is a very important time for her to talk about what happened 100 years ago, because it seems like we're working towards that again in present times. Although nothing's happening yet, we have to sound the early warnings. That's the relevance of it in present time. So without further ado, I hand it over to Sudha Jagannathan.
Thank you. Thank you to the ICHRRF organization, and the fact that you hold these conventions to educate everybody gives people like me a chance to share our stories. And as Carl mentioned, I'm originally from India, have lived in the US for 40 plus years, and I never thought I would have to stand up and defend my right to be Hindu in America. And I'm having to do that. I'm very glad that I get to share our story. So last convention I spoke about the Mappila riots, and that happened in my state a century ago. It was a Muslim-Hindu conflict. But today I'm going to be talking about something that most Indians don't know about, the Goan Inquisition. And when you think about Inquisition, you think, hey, that was a Catholic thing in Europe. How did that come to India? And when you think about Goa, what comes to your mind? The golden beaches, right? The nightclubs, the party place. Well, it is that today, but at one time it was a small village. And it all changed through history, right? So at that time, 500 years ago, India was under the Islamic invasion. So I'm just going to give you a brief outline of a little bit of history, because when I talk about Hindus and persecution, most of my American friends say, never heard about this. We thought you were always successful people. How could you have been persecuted? Well, there is a history. So let's move to the next slide. And it's a very brief, one more. It's a very brief overview. The Islamic invasion started in 653 CE. And the Hindus bore a terrible, terrible brunt of cruelty and brutality that we had never seen until then. Because we had internal conflicts, but an outsider coming in with a different way of thinking, and it was a major assault on our civilization. And it wasn't that we just sat back and said, okay, kill me. No, we did. We fought back. That's why we survived today. We fought back. But it was brutal. So today, when I hear people say, oh, you guys have such bad habits as Hindus, your women kill and burn themselves up, you have child marriages, you cover your women's face. Well, we did do it at one time. It all happened when the foreign invasion came in, and they would kidnap our women. Even if the women killed themselves some other ways, the dead bodies were desecrated. So we have experienced a lot of behavioral assaults that changed our pattern of living. So after the Islamic conquest, the Islam continued in India for a long time. There is no part of India that did not have any impact from Islamic or the next European invasion in India. Every part of India suffered from it. So when we look at the European colonization, the first was the Portuguese. And then came a wave of French, Dutch, and the British. And the British ruled for 250 years. And there's always a little bit of accusation that comes to us that says, you allowed British to conquer you. Well, we fought them too, and then we kicked them out. I want to emphasize that. We really loved kicking them out. So, but it's only been 75, 76 years. But again, that had major impact on our society, and this is why Indian society today is not what it was about, let's say, 1200 years ago. Obviously, you don't expect it, but it's very different today. So let's move on. Since our independence in 1947, and prior to that, we have had a lot of issues of Hindu-Muslim, because those were the two major religions. Even though we had other minority religions like Sikhs and Buddhists and Jains, and my very small group of Christians, the majority of conflicts came from the Muslim and the Hindu, amongst the two. And of course, we heard about the Kashmiri. Then Afghanistan is denuded of minorities, right? I think there are 20 Sikhs and Hindus left there. A land that had close to 1 million Hindus and Sikhs now have about 20 to 200. Pakistan, plunging populations. Bangladesh Hindus may disappear in another couple of decades. So it's a wipe out of a civilization, culture, and a faith that was that this land from Iran all the way to Myanmar was Hindu, no longer, right? So today what we are seeing is a rise of Christianity and Islam and the missionary activity. So that's why we have to go back and see what happened during the Inquisition to understand the current situation in India. So the Goan Inquisition, what happened there? The Catholic Church that dominated Europe 500 years ago, when they were exploring the world and they landed in the new discovered land, they imposed their faith, which we saw in the Americas, right? That's why the indigenous were wiped out. They came to India, and the Inquisition definition is an ecclesiastical tribunal established by the Pope for suppression of heresy. And it went from Europe, it came to Asia and to Latin America. And let's move up. And it had to do with the Catholic Church. Religious authority control and making sure that no respect, not Hindus are about mutual respect. I want to be very clear about it. When we say namaste, I'm saying, I bow down to the spirit in you, which is the same as in me. Right? There is no difference between you and me. But this was a foreign faith. Same with Islam. That said, no, we are superior to you. You are nobody. And Catholic Church embarked on imposing their values on the Hindu society. So how did it start? So if you know the history of Europe, history of America, there was a great desire to find a way to India, because India was the richest land at that time. You know, the spices from India, the silks, ivory, everything was premium demand. And at that time, the main source of getting all of this were through the Arab traders. The Europeans decided they wanted to find a direct route. So they came down the coast of Africa. Bartholomew Diaz in 1496 came, and he turned back. He didn't come around. But next comes Vasco da Gama from Portugal. He comes around, he meets an Indian trader who shows him the way to India. He lands on my shores of Kerala. And the Portuguese, 1498 he lands, and then of course immediately starts meddling in the local affairs. So a local king said, get out. So they moved up the coast and settled on Goa. Goa was just a hole in the wall village at that time. And they settled there and set up their first colony. And along with the Portuguese explorers came the missionary. And they brought Catholicism, converting with the intent to convert Goans to Christianity. And so it began, the official Inquisition was brought to India by Saint Francis Xavier. He was canonized for that great act, okay? But it began in 1560, continued for 250 years. It was abolished in 1812. Hindus, Jews. There was a thriving Jewish community in Goa. They suffered like anything. Their temples were destroyed, forced conversions. That seems to be a pattern with Abrahamic religions. I don't mean any disrespect here to anybody of Muslim or Christian faith, okay? I'm just saying what happened to my community because Hindus are not Abrahamic. And this forced conversions, torture, killing, taxes, taxes would be imposed on you. And I think we heard from some of the other speakers too, they faced punishing taxes for not being somebody else. And then what happened with the Portuguese Inquisition? An exodus of Hindus and Jews from the north to the very south. There's a community called Gauda Saraswat Brahmins, GSB. They were originally in Kashmir. They escaped from there due to the Islamic issues. They settled in Goa. Then comes the Portuguese. They are driven out of there. They come and settle in the south. There are lots of those members of that community where I live. Very successful business people. The Jews left, settled in Kochi, which is my hometown. And the king said, you will always be safe here. I want to also point out, Jews never faced persecution among the Hindus of India for 2,000 years. Early Christians never faced persecution. Early Muslims came as traders, and our kings ordered the official folk to have their Hindu daughters married to the traders. Okay, so that was how I would say open-minded the Hindu communities were. Anyway, let's keep moving. So you see the map of Africa from Portugal, Lisbon, coming to the Cape of Good Hope. And I was at Cape of Good Hope a few weeks ago, and I felt sad. It was very emotional, excuse me, but to know what had happened, it was not a good moment for the Indian community. And Goa, if you see, it's somewhere in the middle there, near Mumbai today. It was a very, very tiny place, and that was a Portuguese settlement and colony. As I said, early Portuguese were adventurers. They married the native women. They studied the Congani, which was a local language. They had no problems with other communities. But once the missionary came, the whole situation changed. St. Francis Xavier came, and he could not convert even one Hindu. And it annoyed him like anything that he could not do that. And then he went to the Malaccas, and from there he wrote a letter to the king, Portuguese king, and said, we need to impose Inquisition on India in Goa to achieve Christianity in India. So if some land somewhere out there decides, okay, they need to come and commit atrocities on a faraway place so that they could get some Christians. And that's what happened. And like I said, he was canonized in 1622, and he also was a co-founder of the Jesuits, and celebrated as the greatest missionary since Paul the Apostle. This is a picture of St. Francis, and he also has a church in Goa. I visited that church, and on the picture on the right is a casket. Okay, and through the casket you can see his dead body. They have preserved it. This is another thing that really strikes people like me. like how absurd it is that he brought so much sorrow and terrible time to the Hindus. And here we are, the Hindus will go visit the church and say, wow, look at that dead body, maybe he can give me a blessing. You know, I'm just saying, this is what the Hindus are. We did not throw it out. We still recognize this is part of our history, and it's a very famous church. There are Christians in Goa who revere Francis Xavier. So the methods of Inquisition, I'm not going into it because we saw a lot of the graphic pictures and we heard of the stories of what had happened to people around the globe. Same thing happened in India. You know, anybody could be accused of being a heretic or refusing to convert, and then there would be a sham trial, and they would be punished. And if you don't want to be punished, you had options. You could confess, you could do a penance, or you could convert, right? If you converted, you did not have to pay taxes for 15 years. Okay, so there were incentives given. But there was a lot of destruction of temples. Approximately 700 temples were destroyed in the part of Goa. Hindus were called uncultured, savages, demon worshippers. And then I look at the indigenous people of Latin America. The Mayans were called by the Europeans as the stupidest people in the world, until about 150 years ago when the American John Smith said they are the smartest people on earth. So there is a perspective here of, and a pattern how the Europeans always call somebody else as savages. Hindu women were kidnapped, raped, all sorts of things. And then Hindus on the streets would be kidnapped. Okay? Piece of beef rubbed on their lips, that would make them outcast. The only option they had was to convert. So this is how the Catholic Church achieved a modicum of conversions. It was all the Goan Christians today are from forced conversions. Nobody voluntarily went and said, I'm going to be a Christian. They did not. Hindus could not hold public office. They could not be court witnesses. Their properties were confiscated. Families were not allowed to inherit their father's property. Orphans would be forcibly taken and their properties taken by the missionaries. And what did the missionaries do? The missionaries lived a luxurious life on confiscated properties and with native mistresses, right? So they lived a grand life, but at the expense of the lives and misery of the natives. And what happened with all these atrocities? Of course, the intellectuals left, which meant there was a vacuum in governance of this colony. Portuguese were few in number. They depended on the local Hindus mostly, and they lost all of that. And that was also the downfall of Portugal as one of the greatest economic colonial powers of the world. And it lost its political standing. How to say it? Very good. I will not read through it. Essentially, they passed laws saying prohibitions regarding marriages, which meant Hindu marriages couldn't happen the way we conduct marriages. They couldn't dress in Indian clothing. They could not have music with their instruments. They could not be, after the wedding, the bride and groom sit in one place where the elders or the participants will come and bless them. Could not happen. They could not fast on special Hindu days, but they could fast on Christian days, right? So it was, and Hindu men could not wear their dhotis, their traditional, pants. So it was really all the way down to the minutest level of control. So a lot of Hindus just left because they just couldn't survive in Portuguese Goa. And I just want to say, it was a complete cultural genocide of Hindus. And we don't see, most Indians don't know the story, because these are kind of, so this happened about, until 1812, and then India was under British colonialism, and we had a lot of stuff going on. 1947, India got independence. We had other things to worry about, and this is now coming into prominence, and people are learning about it. The GSB, the Gauda Saraswat Brahmin members are speaking, writing books, so all of this history is coming back, so that everybody in the world can learn about it. This is actually a column in Goa, and right now there are calls to make it a national monument. People would be tied to this pillar. Their hands would be chopped off unless they fell on the feet of the missionary and said, "I confess," I convert. So that is a very bloody symbol of the atrocities committed on the Hindu community by the Portuguese. I would say the Jews also suffered, some Muslims suffered, but at least their mosques were not destroyed and they were not forced to convert. They had to pay special taxes. Let's go on to the next one, because we repeated some of this. So I just want to see, here's a nice quote by the French historian and philosopher Voltaire. Goa is sadly famous for its Inquisition, which is contrary to humanity as much as to commerce. The Portuguese monks deluded us into believing that the Indian populace was worshipping the devil, while it is they who served him. So he's saying the Portuguese were the ones serving the devil, right? I'm glad there were Europeans who recognized it. Now going forward, there is another French traveler at the same time, was an eyewitness to all of this, and he published a book, and I took some of that stuff from him. And there is a website by Op India, which has summarized some of this information on how many were murdered, converted, etc. And you might say 16,000, that doesn't seem like a lot of numbers. But at that time in India, the population was, I would say, about 180 million. And Goa was a very small place. So to kill off 16,000 means a big number at that time. Maybe the next. Yeah, so today, like I said, there are books authored about the Goan Inquisition. There is the Goan Inquisition is a book by a Maharashtrian, another one by Monsieur Dillon, from the time where all of this was going on. And then, of course, the great Sitaram Goel published something about the papacy, its doctrine and history. And Shefali Vaidya, she is a very prominent speaker on this particular topic, because her family originated there, and now she lives in the south. But she has really made this topic relevant for today's young Hindus and all Indians. Her book will be published next year. We hope she will be coming out to the US for a book tour. And of course, we'll invite everybody to hear from a descendant of someone who survived. So, lessons that we learn. Justice and accountability. We talked about accountability earlier. Well, it begins with an acknowledgement this happened. Okay? Neither Portugal nor the Vatican has ever apologized. But I also say no Indian has asked for apology. So we have to be blamed for that. Religious tolerance and understanding. Today, Goa has a majority Hindu and a minority Christian, so if you're a Portuguese, Goan, you can also get Portuguese citizenship, but they don't end up in Portugal. Most of the Goans who settle in Portugal will go work in UK, because it's better for them to be there. Also, the last PM of Portugal was part Indian. I would say that is good justice, right? An Indian back in Portugal. Why do we need to remember all of this? Because what has happened 500 years ago is happening today in India. I just want to ask all my Christian friends everywhere to be conscious that Cultural genocide is not okay. We Hindus, we are the last standing indigenous people in the world. We need to be left alone. Earlier one of the things was live and let live. Allow us to be, right? We may sound like 1 billion, but we are a minority global religion. The majority religions are Christianity and Islam. We just need a fair chance. But today the evangelical Catholic missionaries, with money from the United States, the Southern Baptist Church sends 180 million to India. Why? Don't we need the money in the US for American whites, black Americans, indigenous people? Why isn't that $180 million remaining here? We don't need it in India. And it's used in India in very, very bad ways. Forced conversions, destruction of our temples, grabbing our temple lands, and continuing what the Goan Inquisition did. Except it's not an institution of Inquisition, it's an institution of church conversions happening in India. And just to put it in context, the Christian church is the #1 private landowner in India. How many of you knew that? Of course. Yes. And the #2 is the Islamic Waqf Board. How is that? And the Waqf Board, I have to say, is now outstripped the church. And there is a lot of controversy around it. But it's not the Hindus who own the land. We hardly have any temples in northern India. The new temple of Ram was built in Ayodhya, the first temple in a traditional style. So anyway, I just want to say, our people have suffered a lot. All my ask is, let us practice mutual respect and understanding amongst all of us. We can live together. Nobody is superior to anyone else. We are all equals. We are lesser than the wild animals out there, I would say. So, mutual respect and understanding, if we get that, we'll all be a happy society. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you, Sudha Jagannathan, for that. Actually, I'm from an Indian Christian background, at least my father's side, and there are so many undercurrents that I see happening even today. But that's a topic that we can get into at some other point. But thank you very much for that presentation.